Well, hello there. This is Dee, and I am still on my patio, still with my dog Murphy here, and still recording. I wanted to record one more because both of these are flashbacks to the road trip, and I wanted to pop those out really quickly. You can hear my dog breathing, probably. He's going to get a little bit of water. But I wanted to talk about one more thing from the trip, and the trip, one of the things that I mentioned before was that this was pushing myself outside my box, outside my comfort zone. And I think I've been seeing this and reading this in books lately about us becoming too comfortable. And I noticed that with myself. I become too comfortable in the house. I became too comfortable with my routine. And it does, I don't say weakens us, but it softens us. And it makes it harder for us to handle the things that come along. I think that's partly what happened on this trip with me. And partly why I was dealing with some anxiety and depression, all that kind of stuff. I wasn't used to it. Now, a big part of it too was my system doesn't handle it like some other people's systems do. My system has been damaged by benzodiazepines and other thing, and I got different things that go on that make it a little harder for me to process some of the stress-inducing events that happen in our lives. But part of it is I've gotten comfortable being at home in a routine, where I know what's going on with it, where I go to the grocery store in the morning and there he goes again. The last episode he was barking during the episode, and he's going to bark in this one too, so we'll go with it. Murphy, quiet. That's a good boy. Leave it, Murphy. Leave it. Okay. We'll get there. He's part Pyrenees, half Pyrenees, and Pyrenees are barkers, so he's a guard dog. This is what he does, but we're working on him. But one of the things about that outside the box, pushing myself outside the box was, oh, hang on a second. I finally sat down again thinking I would, again, expectations that I might be able to sit there and do this, but I got to go correct my dog. Murphy, leave it. Good boy. Just let it go, okay? Quiet. So I'm going to go back to pacing. That's what I did last episode. I'm going to do it again just to help keep things a little more quiet, so you don't have a dog barking in your ear the whole time you're listening to the episode. But this one is about pushing outside the box, and one of those things was one of my fears. Okay, and this was a fear that I had to deal with on this trip. I mean, I was pushing outside my comfort zone in so many things, but one that I kept running into was my fear of heights, acrophobia. I suffer from a fear of heights. It didn't used to be significant. It was always there on a moderate level. But after taking benzodiazepines and anxiety drugs for 12 years and then coming off them, it was extremely heightened. Now it's gotten a little better, and I think I could handle more than I used to, and I can handle a little more than I did when I first came off the drugs, but it's still there. And it is strong at times. I have, woken up at night thinking that, I'm at the top of a building standing near the edge, and my whole body just shuts down. It can be tight. It can be, not tight. What's the word I'm looking for? It can be intense. That's the word I'm looking for. On this trip, there were several times when I had to deal with fear of heights. And on this trip, that came in the form of tall bridges over rivers and such. It came in the format of, some drop-offs off of a road that we were taking going up to a hiking trail. It came in the form of cliffs, hiking near bluffs and cliffs. We did a lot of that hiking around. And it came in the result actually at the theme parks too. When we hit the theme parks down in Orlando, it came in the form of the height on the hotel when we were staying at wasn't big, but the heights would come from some of the rides and roller coasters. And it also would come from transportation systems, and I'll talk about that in a second. But one of my goals was actually to push through some of this, push myself as far as I can, because it's kind of a form of exposure therapy. But part of this was actually pushing that fear. There was other fears I had along the way, and other things I had to challenges just of getting outside of my routine, getting away from home, being away from my wife, all kinds of stuff going on. But one of the significant ones was my fear of heights. And I did okay. On the hiking trip, I actually pushed myself, and I did things. I walked across a bridge that I normally didn't think I could walk across. That was pretty high up. I hiked along some ledges, and as long as I was a few feet back, I was okay. Some cliffs and stuff, I wouldn't get to the corner of a cliff, I wouldn't get to the edge, but I would stand back a few feet, and I could really enjoy the scenery and the vistas. But one of the things I noticed on this was your fears, pushing through them is a good thing, and exposure therapy is a good thing. But it isn't always the result, and that's what surprised me. What surprised me was sometimes, instead of pushing through a fear or a worry and coming out the other side with a newfound confidence, and I've done that many times with things that I've pushed through, sometimes it actually kind of backfires on you. And I don't regret doing this at all. But with me, I realized instead of pushing through and releasing the anxiety and releasing that, I kept building up the stress of it. And it came harder and harder. So after hiking and doing some of these cliffs and stuff, I was a little on edge from it. We got down to the theme parks in Orlando, and there was these really tall roller coasters and stuff like that, and I had it on my mind. I knew I was wanting to do some of these rides, but some of these rides were really high up, and that was getting to me. And the pinnacle of it was this. We were staying at a hotel down there that had, for those of you who have been to Disney World, we at the last couple days we were staying at a hotel on Disney World property that had its primary transportation was a gondola system. It's the Skyway. Many of you are familiar with this. And this gondola system was high up at times. It's your traditional gondola system, if you've never been there, that you would find at a ski resort. For those who have ever been to a ski resort, you see the gondolas that take you all the way up to the top, or gone to the sea, or maybe at some sightseeing place where you're going to take a gondola up to see the view from the top of a mountain. It was this gondola system, this type of thing. And I used to take these all the time when I go skiing. And I've been okay with that, although I've kind of a little less. This one I was sure I could do, and I was sure I could push through, but it was a little nerve-wracking. So we got there, and we were going to go over to one of the theme parks, and we got on the first section of it, which happens to be the tallest section of the entire gondola system. And it was getting to me. It was getting to me. Then we had to get off and get another gondola, which was longer, to get all the way over to the theme park. And then we had to get on them coming back. And after I took that first leg coming back, before I got on the second one, I suggested to my friend JB and said, what if we got out here and walked back? There was actually a really nice trail along a lake. Really beautiful to walk back instead. And on that last leg, I suggested we walk back. And we talked as we walked. And he's so understanding and so cool about all this stuff. That's why he's such a great friend. And I told them I had kind of hit my limit. And I realized it wasn't just the gondola, it wasn't just the roller coasters, it wasn't just the hiking, it wasn't just the bridges, it was all this stuff put together. And then I had been at this heightened level of anxiety this whole trip, getting outside my routine, driving across country and conditions and traffic and a lot of things here. And I was doing this on purpose. I was pushing myself, getting out there. But it had built up. And I had gone from this normal state of anxiety of a 3 or something, or a 4, into more of a 7. And I was at this state, at this level most of the time. And so everything was a little more challenge. And when I do something like that, instead of reducing it because I had accomplished something this time, it actually made things worse. And I had to at some point say, I need to stop. Coming back that night on the gondola, that first leg, and then getting off and walking the second leg, was the last time I rode that gondola. I couldn't do it anymore, and I just didn't want to keep putting myself through that. Part of my goal in this trip was to enjoy the trip. And when you're in a constant state of anxiety, it is hard to just enjoy things. That overtakes our lives. And so I didn't ride the gondola again. We had a rental car that I'd driven from Colorado, so we got in the car and we drove to the theme park the next day. And I did that. Now, we still had roller coasters to do and other stuff that was going to be intense, and I did some of these things, and I kept pushing myself, but I kept finding out that I didn't always get better after I did. And I had to know my limitations. I had to understand my age. I had to understand what I've been through in my neurological system after what I've been through. And I had to accept where I'm at. And as much of a theme park junkie I was for so long, and still am to some degree, I can't do what I used to do. Like I said, it's part age, it's part anxiety, it's part neurological complications from benzodiazepines, it's part all kinds of stuff. But I can't do the same attractions I used to. I'd get vertigo, I would get all kinds of stuff. They weren't fun anymore. A lot of that's just age, and I realize that. But a lot of it's also just my system isn't what it used to be due to what I've been through. And the reason I'm talking about this today is that I'm a wholehearted believer in exposure therapy, about pushing ourselves and testing ourselves and getting out there. And we become so comfortable and so even weakened, and I'll say that about myself, even weakened that I need to go out there and push myself and see that I did it. And I did it. I drove 4,500 miles on this trip and got back home in all kinds of conditions and pushed myself in many ways and did it. And those accomplishments are great. But it doesn't always wind up. It doesn't always end in that sudden realization that, hey, I conquered this. Life's so much better. Sometimes it builds up, and sometimes it adds to the anxiety, and sometimes you realize you took on too much at once. So I had to pull back on a few things. I had to pull back on the gondola. I had to pull back on some of the extreme rides that I really wanted to do. And there were some rides that I really wanted to do that I didn't do. I did most of them. But I finally said, enough. And I enjoyed the smaller things of the trip. Not smaller in a derogatory term or a negative term. I mean the simpler pleasures, which can be just as powerful as the big roller coasters. But I started to really enjoyed the meals that JB and I had at restaurants. I really enjoyed those. I enjoyed just walking around and seeing the sights. I enjoyed a little shopping. I enjoyed doing different things. I really enjoyed the hiking that we did earlier. I loved that. I can't believe I'm saying this, but the hiking, I thought, may have been the better part of this trip than the theme parks. And for me to say that is difficult. And I'm an old hiker. I grew up camping a lot when I was a kid. Eagle Scout did all that junk. Not junk, I don't mean drugs. I mean all that great stuff. We did high adventure bases, 2-week, backcountry hikes and canoe trips and all kinds of stuff. So I've done that. I've been there, and I know I can accomplish that. But I just don't do a lot of hiking today as much as I used to. But I'm relearning and trying to get back out there, and my experience with benzodiazepines limited me, but I'm now going out there and trying to do more, and that was wonderful. But all those things in a series was a lot to take on. 2.5 weeks of it. It was a lot, and a lot of driving, and a lot of stress, and I realized this whole trip, I just kept building up my anxiety level. And then there's an episode there, I think it was episode 11, I believe, or something, where I just had a full breakdown one morning. And it was a good breakdown. And I needed it. And I had to have that emotional release, and I'm so glad I did. But that was the culmination of all that building up. So yes, I am a proponent of pushing ourselves outside the box when we're ready, and in reasonable steps. That's what I think I'm coming back to. It's good to test ourselves. It's good to push ourselves. Our lives can be so limited and so small, especially when we deal with severe anxiety. And few of us want that for the rest of our lives. I know I don't. So when we feel a little better, when we feel a little stronger, it's good to test those limits, to push those limits, to get ourselves out. But just be careful how much you take on at once. Take small steps, take simple steps, and then enjoy the progress you made and build on that. I think that was my biggest mistake. I'm a true believer that people with anxiety, even severe anxiety, can live full, exciting, meaningful, passionate lives. I've suffered from severe anxiety, especially after I came off the drugs, and I know what that's like, and I still have some of that. But it's not going to stop me. I just have to be practical. I have to be reasonable, and I have to take the right steps at the right time. I don't want to sit on the couch the rest of my life afraid to go outside. I want to be outside. I'm outside right now in my backyard. It's safe. It's not this huge thing, but it's different than just sitting in my office talking to you. And I'm going to do more of that. And I do think when Murphy starts to bark, it's a good time to wind these things up. Murphy, do you think it's time for us to close this one out? Do you think so? I think Murphy thinks so. So, thanks for tuning in. I hope this one was helpful. I hope we're going in a good direction. I hope you like what we're doing. If you're not, comment and let me know what you think. Your comments do influence what we do on here, even though this is my podcast and I'm doing a podcast I want to do regardless. But sometimes I need other people to help guide me. And I do listen to what people say. And I do appreciate people who write in and are part of this and part of this journey. And we are just getting started. So if you want to be part of this from the start, now's the time. Join in and tell me what you think. And we're going to tack on online groups and online memberships here or something or whatever where you can be more part of it if you want to. Right now I'm just trying to get this launched and get this moving. Then we'll start to tie in a community that's linked to it. I'm excited about that, and I think we can do so much with that. But again, tying it back to the topic of this episode, I have to be careful about how much I bite off in one step, at one day, at one time. You know what I'm saying? How much I bite off at a time. The trip was a lot to cram in on that one trip. The podcast and all the new membership and all the stuff at Easing Anxiety, everything I was doing was a lot to build, and I was on research teams and groups, and I was just worn out, so I tried to take a couple months off. Again, I took too much. This podcast, the ongoing theme you're going to hear over and over and over again is finding balance. Taking life in moderation and finding balance. And we're going to get there. Together, we're going to get there. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for being part of this. And I can't wait to find out where we go from here. And Murphy says, I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Hey, this is Dee. Thank you so much for stopping by and checking out our podcast. I do need to remind everyone that this podcast is for informational purposes only and should never be considered medical, psychological, or professional health advice of any kind. If you or someone you know is dealing with significant mental health issues, please seek professional help. Resources can be found in our show notes and on our website at unevenpodcast.com. Take care of yourself, and I'll catch you on the flip side.